Hi my wonderful weirdlings, this is Beyond Authentic, where we go beyond the mundane to tell you all about authentic witchcraft. My name's Lisa and today's video is a special one. It's all about protection, but today we get a little bit more advanced. As I talked about in my top 10 tips for baby witches video, which I will link to just up here in the corner, it also should be linked down below somewhere in the description box. Protection is one of those things that you really want to develop kind of almost like a second nature when you start coming into the craft. So if you think, oh, I'm going to do an abundance working, build a little bit of protection in there. Whatever it is you're doing, make sure that you kind of have a protective element kind of built in, or like a back door or like a fail safe or something, so you can activate that protection if needed. 9 times out of 10 it's not going to be needed, but sometimes it will be. So as I'm filming this, we are getting towards Halloween, so Samhain is very rapidly coming towards us. Now for a lot of people in the craft, this means that the veil is thinning. Now what do I mean by that? What I mean is literally the veil, the kind of barrier between our world and the world beyond, so the world of the dead. That veil thins, and it means you can start to kind of almost see through it. So if you are a magical practitioner, this is the time where your thoughts may really be focusing on protection. Yes, there's ancestral work to do, and you might want to use a spirit board or some other way of contacting them. You might leave offerings for various deities. My own altar, as you can see, is getting sort of spookier and spookier as the videos go on. But that's just part of it. You might also decide that actually this is a really good time of year to up your protective game overall. And that's normally what I like to do at this time of year, as well as doing all the spooky stuff. It's when I will pay particular attention to the wards I've got in place. I might redo some spell bottles, I might redo some spell mojo bags or things like that. So this is a really good time of year for me just to kind of stop, pause, think about kind of the year that I've had, think about the year that is coming, and also to really ramp up that protective element. I do tend to my protective workings quite a bit throughout the year anyway, but Halloween, Samhain is a really good time just to kind of focus on it, because, you know, we're surrounded by spooky things, aren't we? So it's a really good time. Anyway, a couple of things that you can do. Now, if you are a beginner, if you are a baby witch, if you're new to the craft, there's a few things I recommend. I've got to put a plug in here. One of them is the 3-in-1 spell kit that I actually produce as part of Authentic Witch. So if you don't know, the link should be coming up on screen just here. So Authentic Witch is a business that myself and my friend Kirsty have started. We are 2 independent witches. It's a very small business. It's literally us 2 doing 95% of the work. Our friend Anita is helping us out with some of the office stuff, and Rufus is helping to make some of the pyrography items and things like that at the moment. He's going to be hopefully producing more as we go on. But one of the items I sell are 3-in-1 spell kits. So that is something I would recommend, seriously, because I've got one here actually. You get kind of all of the gubbins and bits and pieces that you need for the spell working. It comes with a spell bottle, all of the herbs, everything. And basically one of the workings you do is a candle magic working. One of them is to create a spell bottle. And then the third one for this protective spell kit is actually a protective wash. So it can be used in the bath or in the shower. So I totally recommend that. I literally put my name to it. This is something that I've created. So obviously it's something that is very sort of dear to my heart. If you don't want to go through all the rigmarole of kind of doing your own working, I do also have some pre-made, pre-charged spell bottles available on the website as well. So do make sure you check those out. If you kind of want to do like a basic protection that is still really super powerful, or in the case of the spell bottles, if you want something that will give you that protection that you can maybe hang in the car, stick in your bag, all of that, and you don't want to sit and do a ritual yourself, maybe you're not that magically inclined, but you are looking for a little bit of protection. So those I would recommend personally. Obviously, yes, I know it's something that I sell, but I would genuinely recommend them. Also on the website we've got this, which is a smudge spray. Now this is actually designed for people that can't use the sage smudging sticks. So if you, for whatever reason, you can't have smoke in your environment, it may be that you've got smoke alarms everywhere, It may be that you live in a rented accommodation and you're not allowed to burn anything. Or it could be a bit like Rufus, that you have asthma or you've got some breathing issues and you can't be around smoke because it will trigger all of that. So this is something that I've come up with. It's a smudge spray. It's got lots of really powerful essential oils in here. It's got rosemary in here. It's made with distilled moon water in here. There are some little crystal chips in here. There's all sorts that have gone into this little bottle. So do check out the website for any of those items. And I can also recommend our range of candles and wax mounts that Kirsty is making, the Kitchen Witch. So do please check those out. But for today's video, I really wanted to concentrate on something with an even bigger bang. So even more protection for when things are just feeling a little bit ooh, you know what I mean? When things are kind of coming your way from all different directions and you think there could be somebody actively working against you, or you just want to protect yourself because you are entering into the magical field and this sort of magical craft, and you want to make sure you've got as strong a level of protection up as possible. So for today's video, I'm actually combining two bottles that I already make. One I call the piss off bottle, and the other one is my rubber and glue bottle. So the piss off bottle, basically I would use hair, nails, urine, lots of other ingredients, some of which I'm going to use today, and that one is really designed to kind of have that negative energy think that the items in that bottle is me, and basically attack that bottle and then get lots of pointy things in it which basically send that energy on its way. And the other one I call the rubber and glue bottle, but this one's really simple because it's that nursery rhyme thing that we had at school. You know, I am rubber, you are glue, it bounces off me and sticks to you. That. So the idea is, if somebody is actively hexing or trying to hex or trying to cast against you, then the idea of this bottle is that it literally is like a mirrored bottle. It reflects that back at the person it came from. Now, there are ethical concerns to think about. The way that I personally think about it is that if you are sending me shit, I have a right to defend myself and send that exact same shit back to you. I'm not going to add anything to it. I'm not going to like actively cast against you, but also I'm not going to take that shit. So before I begin, I just want to clarify that this is how I do this particular spell working, okay? If you want to change up the ingredients, if you want to swap things around, if you don't like using some things but you want to use something else, or if something isn't available to you where you are, feel free to swap them in and out. Have a look online at various correspondences, but feel free to swap out what feels right for you. This is all about you as the practitioner kind of adding your energy, your intention into this. For this working, you're going to need to get yourself some sort of jar or spell bottle. So I'm just going to be using this. It's had pickled onions in it. It's been washed out. It's been dried. It's fine. You can also use something like this, which is an old herb bottle. So literally, I've just washed it out and yeah, dried it, and it's absolutely perfect. But I also like using these for doing like witches' salts and things, because once they're in there, you can sprinkle it. But for a spell working, this will work absolutely fine. Or of course, you can use the little spell bottles. I like using a jar, which is what I'm going to do in this one, because I like really packing in all sorts of different items into my workings. So what are we actually going to put in our spell jar? Wow, this is where you get to be really creative. Now, I went on a little foraging trip recently, and I'll include some footage as I'm talking, and I managed to get hold of all sorts of little bits and pieces, some spiky things, because for me, that's very much the kind of the intention of this working. I want it to be spiky. I want it to be kind of a bit nasty, a bit yucky, a bit ugh. I want it to be really, really kind of potent in its intention. Okay, so I went and got myself some gorse. It is incredibly spiky, so I do have some gloves here. If you are doing this with these particular ingredients, make sure you are protecting yourself on the mundane level as well as the magical. Okay, so as we always say, mundane before magical. So this is what gorse looks like. It is a phenomenal plant. It's been used an awful lot throughout the generations, throughout years and years and years, hundreds and hundreds of years, as a hedging plant, because this is really good if you want to delineate boundaries. It's spiky and it grows really dense. And so, yeah, I mean, you can see just how lethal these spikes look, right? So this is a fantastic plant for that. Now, if you can't get this, you can use other spiky plants. I've got some pyrocanthus, which I'm going to use, which is a plant that I actually grow in the garden as well. But all you're going to want to do is just, if I'm careful with it, I might not need that one. So I've just placed a jar just on top of a couple of boxes just here, just so that you can see everything that I am doing. Right then, so this is really, really, really lethal. So I am just going to be very careful as I push this into the jar. And I want to try as best I can to keep it kind of, yeah, I was about to say I'm trying to keep it flat as it goes down, but as soon as I let go of it, it found its own way. That's fine. It can go its own way, as Fleetwood Mac nearly said. And then I've got another piece of gorse. This time I am just going to cut some of the smaller bits off. I know, right? I said I was going to use my gardening gloves and now I'm holding it by a prickle. But again, I don't mind too much, because what I have found, oops, completely flew across the room. But what I have found is that in general, if a plant is kind of happy for you to use it, then it doesn't tend to try and kill you, if that makes sense. So the spiky things here, I'm just holding on to the spikes, and so far it's not been too bad. I haven't been pricked on those, so that's really good. So then that's your gorse in there. I'm going to put the lid back on because there's plenty there. So I only got a little bit from the actual bush itself, but there is plenty here to use for multiple workings in the future if I so wish. Now, again, while I was out foraging, I did manage to get hold of some spear thistle. So again, the same principle applies. This ends up being super, super spiky. So again, I'm just going to use the sort of these little pruning shears, and I'm just using a piece of this, and I'm just placing that all the way down into the jar itself. Now, as I'm actually doing this, I'm thinking all the way through. Not only am I thinking, what am I going to say next on the video, but there's a part of my brain that is going, I want to create this protection. This is really important that this protection works. Like, this is all for protection. So all the way running through my head is all of this. If anyone's sending me negative energy, they're going to get it back. It's going to rebound on them. All of this. So all of these thoughts are going through my head as I'm doing this. Now, you can do something where you kind of name the product. So you would say, spear thistle, I'm adding you into this working for your protective qualities. Anybody who sends any negative energy my way, let them feel your spikes. So it really is about kind of, you know, stating that intention. If I was doing this without making a video, I would be naming the plants as I'm adding them into the jar, and I would also be saying why I need them to work in the protective elements that they are doing. So that's really good. Next up, we're going to add, now this is one where I am going to wear the gardening glove. Let me just pop it on. In fact, I'm going to put both gloves on, because the next item that I'm using is the world famous, absolutely, isn't it lovely? We all love it, don't we? Stinging nettles. I know, right? Stinging nettles. So these are actually grown in my garden. I know, right? We cultivate stinging nettles, sort of. But yeah, this is from in the garden, as I say. Now, anybody who's ever brushed up against a stinging nettle knows that it just gives you that, you know, that moment where you kind of, you get the little bumps come up, don't you? And it's just that sort of really itchy, annoying kind of, oh. And this is kind of why we're adding this into this working, because what we want is anybody who's actively casting, actively hexing, we want that person to kind of feel like they've just run across some stinging nettles, like rub their hands in the gorse and the thistles. That's what we want. That's really what we want. We want them to kind of know that they're crossing the wrong witch, basically. So all of this protective stuff is fantastic for that. And so I'm just breaking up the, or just cutting, as I should say, some of the leaves off of the top, like so, and from different parts of the other bits of the plants. Oopsie, I did just drop that. This is why you need the gloves. So yeah, as I said with the gorse and the thistle, be really careful with these, because, you know, you can have allergic reactions, and with the best will in the world, mundane before magical, right? You don't want to get stung as you're preparing this, so just keep that in mind. And that's going to be the recurring theme pretty much as we go through this entire video. Just keep in mind your safety, okay, at all times. So again, this is one of those things where I would say that this is not for a baby witch, just because there's a lot of things in here that you really can kind of end up, you know, pricking yourself, getting tetanus, all sorts of things. So just be very, very, very mindful of that. Be very, very careful as you go along. But as you can see, I'm not really breaking anything down. I'm not grinding anything up. I want the spikes in here from the gorse bush. I want the spikes from the thistles. I want the stingy bits from the nettles. I want them all to be kind of, you know, impactful, really. That's what I want them to do. So I am just going to use this bottle and just kind of push them in a little bit, just to make way for some of the other items that are going in. But as you can see, I'm not crushing them down in any way. And you can see right at the bottom, look at all that gorse. Look how evil that gorse bush looks at the bottom. It's lovely, isn't it? Isn't that wonderful? When I say evil, I mean, like, you know, look how protective it is. So the next item I'm adding in is Ditrichia viscosa, otherwise known as false yellowhead. Now, this is one of the plants that, when it's flowering, it kind of looks like it should be a daisy. It looks like it's going to smell really nice, but it's got a really stinky smell to it. It really is very, very pungent and very nasty. And also, the leaves themselves end up being quite sticky, and they're quite jagged. So as you're walking, the leaves will actually stick to you and leave this residue, and it's just horrendous smelling. It doesn't smell too bad right now, at least having said that, it really does. Oh, I wish I hadn't sniffed that then. Whew. Right, anyway, so we're just going to add a few bits of this in. Now again, this is very much, because I'm in the UK, this is part of the British tradition. A lot of these plants aren't British natives. They've been brought over, they've kind of acclimatized to our sort of temperate weather. But if you aren't in the UK, do check your local plants, do check your local kind of correspondences and see what your equivalent plants are, because there will be plants that are native to your area that will have similar properties to these. And again, this isn't about kind of telling you exactly what you need to do this working. This is about giving you some of the tips and tricks that I use, and yeah, kind of advising you of ways that you can take these principles and make this particular working your own. Hi, I'm just popping in to remind you to hit the subscribe button and then click your bell icon, change your settings to all, that way YouTube should notify you each and every time I upload a video. But if you would like to support myself and this channel just a little bit more, you can always go across to buymeacoffee.com/Beyond Authentic, where you can in fact buy me a coffee. Thank you so much for those of you that are supporting me. It really helps what I do here on the channel. And the last of the plants I'm using isn't actually from my foraging. This is from the garden. It's Pyracanthus. Now, the reason I'm using this will be very obvious if you get a close-up. Hang on, just put that one there. So the reason I'm using the Pyracanthus is because look at the size of these spikes. Look at that. It is super sharp, super pointy. As I'm looking at it now, it looks almost like a wasp sting. It's kind of got a really, really thin little sharp point, and then it goes thicker. It's absolutely lethal. I love it. It's got some really lovely berries that the birds love, so it's a really lovely plant to grow in your garden. But we grew this in a pot next to our strawberry plants. So what happened? The strawberry plant runners went in and are now growing in the pot with this, which is fantastic. Free strawberry plants, right? Yeah, absolutely. Except when you go to harvest your strawberries, because you've got all of these spiky kind of lethal jabby things when you're trying to pick your lovely ripe strawberries. So yeah, just bear that in mind. But this is why I'm using it, because it is something that is plentiful to us and is personal to us because it grows in our garden. But also those spikes, whew, let me tell you, you do not want to be on the receiving end of one of those. Right, I think that's all the plants. So I am just going to move my nettles over to one side just so that I don't accidentally brush against those. Now, again, with those stingy nettles, you can use those to make a tea. So what I'm going to do is dry those out in a jar and then grind them up at some point and probably use those in a herbal blend. So yeah, just to bear in mind, not all weeds are weeds, you know what I mean? A weed, the definition of a weed is just something growing in a place that you don't want it to be. So the most beautiful flower in the whole wide world could be considered a weed if you want an immaculately kind of bowling green lawn, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, what else are we going to put in this spell bottle? Because so far it's just a bunch of like plants, herbs and plants. So I've got here some nails. I know, right? I know, right? So these are some, just all sorts of different size nails, and these are actually come from Rufus's DIY kit, basically. So are they special nails? No. Are they iron coffin nails? Do you need to have these ones that are handmade by blacksmith through 7 generations? No, just some different types of nails. So these ones are just these little non-galvanized like tacks, but this is rusty, so that's going in. We've got a couple of other old sort of, you know, slightly used and rusted and looking a bit past the sell-by date, if you like. So we've got a few of those going in. There's also a couple of other fairly okay, it might have been in a wall and then pulled out of a wall, so there's a few other kind of used nails in there as well. But I'm also going to put in a second, I'm going to put a couple more of these in because I do like having these nails in there. So nails have been used in witchcraft and in superstitions as protection for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. In fact, there is a shopping centre in Southampton that opened probably 15-20 years ago. Probably, do you know what, it's probably even more than that, it's probably like 25 years ago. But when it was being built, one of the designers, or part of the building process, was they actually hung nails, like big chunks of nails, like the bigger versions of these, they hung them on like straps all around the top part of the building. So every now and again as you're walking, you'll just see this little thing, and if you knew where to look, you could just see this little thing just kind of flapping in the wind. And what these were basically the equivalent of witch bottles. These were the nails that were just hanging there. They did, one of the reasons they were there was to kind of scare the birds off, the pigeons and things, but the other reason was because it was seen as a protective element. And over the years the nails rusted, and occasionally in places, if you look very carefully, you can see sort of rust marks where it's rained and the rust has kind of run down the building. But that wasn't a problem, because the main reason they wanted it was because the site had been an old burial ground, and superstitions and everything else, they didn't want to upset any of the sort of spirits of the place. So that's why that had all been brought in. I find it really fascinating that those superstitions were still being used and those protective elements were still being sought after for a very, very modern shopping mall. But I do know that there were local witches and local groups that were consulted for those sort of protective elements to make sure that anything that was disturbed wasn't going to cause problems for the mall, the shoppers and the businesses. Well, I think that attention to detail, I think, is absolutely fascinating, and yeah, absolute testament to the people that built that shopping centre. Anyway, what else are we going to put in our lovely jar now that we've got these now that we've got the nails in place? What I am going to do is just pop the lid on and try, without putting my fingers in, and shake the nails down to the bottom a little bit more than they are. Oh, that looks really good, actually. There's a few that I've just got stuck. I don't know if you can see there, look, stuck in all the bushes and things. That's really cool. I like that. So then, those nails are in there going in all sorts of different directions, aren't they? The same as the gorse, the same as the thistle, all different directions. The other thing that you want to do is to use some pins. Now then, when I say pins, it can literally be dressmaker's pins. So this is my little pin cushion. These are actually my pins that I use, and I am going to kind of add a couple of these in. We'll add some purple and we'll add a couple of white ones. There we go. So all I'm doing now is just bending them into lots of different sort of random shapes. And I'm going to just bend that one there. I'm going to bend this one like that, so it kind of bends one way and then bends the other. And finally, the last one, let's do another random bend. So there we go. So those now are all in there as well. And again, it's just sending those energies out there, all everywhere, making sure that anything that is coming my way is being dispersed. The next thing I'm putting in is some broken glass. Now, this is a glass that I actually purposely broke for this working and for use in other workings. So again, if you are somebody who's a bit clumsy and you break a glass, just sweep it up, put it in a jam jar, put it in something where you know it's going to be safe, and be very, very, very careful. Now, I didn't have anything that had been broken recently, so I am going to very carefully put some of this. I'm going to use the gardening gloves again. I'm going to very carefully put some of this broken glass into the jar. So I don't need very big pieces, but there is, you know, quite a lethal kind of combination, this, isn't it? And again, as you can see, all of the principles are kind of the same. So the principles are always sharp, jagged, horrible, kind of dangerous. Those are the things that you want to kind of include in something like this. Okay, so the next item I'm going to put in is some rosemary. So I've got my massive jar of rosemary behind me. Now this is a good herb for protection. So I'm going to put 3 pinches in, because again, 3 is a magical number. There we go. Lots of rosemary in there. There we go. And pop old Skelly Bob's back there. So that is a really good amount of rosemary. I'm also going to put in some tin foil. Now you might be wondering why I've got all these nasty holes. Oh look, there's the other bit of gorse that we had that flew off. It landed in the tin foil. Pop that in as well. So why am I putting tin foil in when, you know, it's full of all this nasty, horrible kind of sharp, nasty, horrible elements? Why are we adding in some tin foil? Well, the tin foil is designed to basically reflect that negative energy. Okay, so if you ever break a mirror, again, similar to breaking a glass, keep the shards, keep them somewhere safe so they're not going to be, like, you know, damaging for pets or children or harmful to anybody, but just keep them to one side, because it's things like that that you want to use in some of these protective elements, some of these wards. Okay, so I am now just going to slightly push in, oops, there we go, I'm going to push the tin foil down to actually get it in all sorts of different directions. And again, it's crumpled up, so again, the idea that the reflections are going in all different directions. And you can use mirror, you can use tin foil, you can use sweet wrappers, anything that is shiny. That's kind of what you want to be adding into this. So you want to get that reflective element involved. So it really is starting to feel like a really strong protective jar, and I'm really happy so far with the way that this is going. The next item I'm adding in here is one that you probably don't have, but again, I'll put the glove on because it is quite a noxious substance, and this is a little piece of poo from one of our bearded dragons. And there is a reason for this, and the reason is that bearded dragons eat a lot of insects and a lot of plant material, but they extract everything out of it, and so what is left is basically just the bones and the nasty bleh from everything that they've eaten. So this is made up of like locust bones, larvae, bits and nastiness, and also it's just something that is small, compact, but I've got to tell you, when they release it, it really does have a very, very potent smell. So that is why that has gone into there. So again, I'm going to carefully take the glove off, not using those 2 fingers that picked up the poo. I think that is pretty much everything in terms of noxious substances. The next ingredient, we're back to something that's a little less kind of nasty, and this is some mugwort. So again, I've got a little baggie here with some mugwort in. I'm going to put 3 pinches in, 1, 2, and oh, there we go, 3. Now mugwort is a fantastic herb for protection, so that's why that's gone in there. I've got some amethyst chips as well, so I'm going to put some of these in, and I'm going to use probably, there's 1 pinch, there's 2, oh, can I get all of these in 1 pinch? There we go. 3 pinches of amethyst chips. So the amethyst is in there for its kind of healing properties as well as its protective elements. And then the last item I'm putting in here is some sea salt flakes. Now this is my favorite type of salt to use for workings, just because it's big, it's crunchy, you get a really good amount when you take a pinch of it, and it just feels very different to table salt, which for me feels very processed and very refined. Don't worry, if you've only got table salt, you can use it. But I just like this because it feels a bit more raw and a bit more kind of like grr, you know what I mean? So then we're adding in 3 more pinches. 1, 2, there we go, 3. I'm just going to take off what was stuck to my fingers. So there we are. So there are actually two more items that I am going to add into this, one of which I'm going to show you and one of which I'm not. The one I'm going to show you is some hair. So this is just some of my hair that I have used when I've been brushing my hair. The ones you take it off of your brush, and again I've just put it in one of these little kind of jars, and so I'm just taking some of this. There we go, and I'm just placing some of that. I'm just rolling it into a little ball. I'm just going to place that into there. So that is what we call a tag lock. Now, a tag lock is a very sort of, sounds like a very grand word, doesn't it? But it just basically, that is the connector that connects me to this jar, okay? So because this working is designed to protect this entire home and everybody in it, so our fur babies, I am just going to stroke the dogs and maybe get a couple of strands of their fur as it comes out, because they are molting at the moment. So I will get a little bit of that and put into here as well. Likewise with Rufus, I'm just going to clip a little tiny bit of his hair and put in here as well. And then the only other thing that I am going to include in this, which I'm not going to show you, is some pee. Yep, that's right. We are going to have to pee in a jug or a bag or something and pour some of that in here. So I am going to do that later on, and obviously I'm not going to show you what that looks like on camera, so you're just going to have to imagine this filled up with that particular liquid. Now I know some people also use their own menstrual blood, other people use kind of fingernail clippings, all sorts of things. You basically just want to make this as close to you, but also as like properly toxic and noxious as possible. And then what you do is you obviously, if it's a screw top jar like this, you screw that jar on, and then what you want to do is to light a candle. Ideally for me, I always use a black candle for this sort of working, but you can use any color candle that fits your correspondences or that you just happen to have. If you've only got a red candle, use a red candle. At the end of the day, it's the fact that you're sealing it and it's your intention that is the really important thing with this. And then you want to go ahead and seal that lid. If you haven't got a candle, glue it down, tape it, make sure that that lid is as tight and as firmly locked into place as it can possibly be. And for me, what I would then do is put this out into the garden under, for me, a waxing moon. So a moon that is growing, the phase of the moon between the dark moon and the full moon. Now this is important for me because this is where I am increasing the energy. And it might sound a little bit weird and it might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but for me, this is the ideal time to do protection workings because the energy is growing. And what I want to do, I want this particular jar to be as strong and as oomphed and as magical as possible. So that is why I like to do this type of working on a waxing moon. Other practitioners, other witches will use a waning moon or a full moon or a dark moon. And again, that choice is entirely up to you. It is whatever works for you. This is the key thing with witchcraft. It has to make sense to you. For instance, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, it isn't your spooky season because you're not heading towards Samhain, you're heading towards Beltane. So again, make sure that when you do these type of workings, you take all of that into consideration, look at your correspondences, look at all of this, and then do what is right for you and your situation, okay? It may well be that using urine is something that you absolutely find disgusting, is totally beyond you, you cannot do. In that case, fine, charge it with moon water. You know what I mean? You don't have to use all of these ingredients, as I said at the beginning. I've made variations of this jar for about the last 15 years, depending on my need, depending on the situation. It will vary as to the exact contents on here, but generally you get the gist of what I'm saying. So the question is then, what do you do with protection jar once you've finished it, once you've got all of the ingredients added that you want to add and you've sealed it? What do you do with it then? Well, if you're able to, my advice would be to bury it in your back garden or bury it on your property. If you are able to get underneath your kind of doorstep or around the front door, that might be a really good place. I'm going to be burying it in the back garden because this room is obviously where I do a lot of the magical workings. So this is where I do my tarot reading, where my altar is, where all of my ingredients are, where my circle is basically. So for me, the garden that is just behind that wall that you can't see, but just there, that is the best place to put it. If you can't bury it, maybe think about making a slightly smaller one and leaving it near to your front door. So you might want to bury it in a plant pot if you've got one. If you haven't got a plant pot, or if you're in a flat, then just keep it somewhere where it's not going to be disturbed. So maybe in a cupboard, maybe the cupboard under the stairs, that sort of thing, right back in the far corner. You want to make sure that it isn't disturbed, and you want to make sure that nobody can access it. No children, no pets, because obviously after a while this is going to be really, really, really noxious if you do go ahead and fill it with urine. But even on its own, it's got broken glass, nails, sharp implements, horrible herbs. It's got all sorts of stuff in there. So you want to be really careful and just protect the people around you. Just a couple of options in case you want them. Instead of using the hair, fingernails and urine as a tag lock, you can actually use the people's names. So if it's for yourself and your partner, write down your names on a piece of paper, write down your date of birth, put those in here as well. Yes, it will probably dissolve off the paper with the water or the urine or whatever it is you're using, but that just means it's getting involved and fully like mixed in with the spell. So that will work as a tag lock. You can also add a sigil onto the top or onto the side or on the bottom, inside it, however you want to add your sigil. It may be that you've got a personal sigil. I've designed myself a personal sigil, but you might also want to design one specifically for this particular working. So you might design a protection sigil or something. You can also add runes or charms. I've got a little triquetra charm, which I'm probably going to glue to the lid. Anything like that that speaks to you of protection. Feel free to add as much of that into this as you need or as you feel that you want to. The most important thing to bear in mind about a working like this is that it makes sense to you. So whatever you want to add in, whatever you want to take out from my list, absolutely adapt it, do whatever you need to do for it to make sense to you. In fact, I would be fascinated to know what ingredients you put in this if you do one of these workings. But that is it from me today. If you've got any questions or any suggestions, please put them down in the comment section. If you like this video, please do give it a big old thumbs up. That really helps me out with YouTube's algorithm. But all that's left to say is to stay you, stay weird, stay authentic, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.